Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the NOAA Central Library. My name is Katie, and I will be your host today for this presentation. We are excited to bring you another of our NOAA eco-based fisheries management seminar series events. And I want to give you a few logistics first. You are an attendee, so you are muted. If you have any questions, please put those in the question or chat panels, and they will be read off at the end in our Q&A portion. We are recording this, so if you have to duck out at any moment, please know this will be on the library's YouTube channel after the fact. I will place the YouTube channel in the chat for you to follow. Also, since we are recording, any questions that you put in to the chat will be passed on to the presenters. If we don't get to your question, they will receive that on the back end and answer you offline. And with that, I'm going to turn us over to Peg, who is going to introduce our speakers today.
Thanks, Katie. This is Peg Brady from NOAA Fisheries. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're continuing our 2021 NOAA EBM seminar series that was initiated by our team back in November 2017. And our main objectives for this is to really showcase the excellent projects that are being implemented by NOAA and our partners to advance ecosystem-based management, and to increase awareness among many of our colleagues regarding EBM and highlighting the initiatives that NOAA and our partners are undertaking. NOAA Library has been a great co-host in the series. The seminars are held every second Wednesday of each month at this time, 3 Eastern Time. Each presentation, as we know, is publicly accessible, recorded, and archived. I just want to point out, I know we're conflicting with the Northeast Fisheries Management Council meeting this week, and apologies for that. But if you have colleagues that are joining that meeting and cannot be here, please let them know that the YouTube channel will have a recording of this presentation. There's going to be an opportunity to ask questions, as Katie pointed out, and she'll field those questions when the presentation is over. And I just have 3 quick announcements. One is our next presentation is May 12th, and we're very happy to have Mark Dickey-Colas from the International Council of Exploration of the Seas. He will be talking about EBFM and the work that they're doing at ICES. And also, I want to draw your attention to a May 4th noontime seminar, which is coming up shortly, and that is being hosted by the One NOAA series, seminar series, and it is the State of the Ecosystem Report of the Northeast Shelf. A couple of presentations have been made around at the council meetings, but there's a public one available now on the 4th. And that information is in the chat, so feel free to go to the chat box and look for that. And I've also provided the link to the report at the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. So a lot of work's happening right now, and we're very happy to today to be. And we really want to welcome our 4 speakers today. We're very been working hard on this presentation and been doing a lot of work over the past couple of years. And I'll just quickly introduce them. Our first speaker is Ted Diers, who is the state co-chair to the NROC, and he's also the administrator of the Watershed Bureau for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. Our second speaker is our federal co-chair to NROC, Chris Boelke, who is the chief of New England branch of Habitat and Ecosystem Services for NOAA Fisheries. And then Nick Napoli, who has been the planning director, ocean planning director at NROC, and will go into great detail explaining the work they've been doing. And then finally, Emily Shumchenia, who is the data science lead for NROC. So I want to welcome all 4 of them. We're going to have them rotate through, and I'll turn it over to Ted first. And again, thank you for joining us today, and feel free to post any questions you may have. So thank you. Ted?
Thanks, Peg. It's great to be here with all of you NOAA folks. Very soft spot for NOAA in my heart because of my long years working with the coastal program here in New Hampshire and all the interactions that we've had over the years. So I get to just sort of kick us off and talk a little bit about first NROC and then a little bit about kind of ocean stuff. And the Northeast Regional Ocean Council was born way back in 2005 by a bunch of us coastal program managers and our federal compatriots in a number of different federal agencies, with really one goal in mind, and that goal was really to start pushing forward on efforts to collaborate across our states to look at ocean planning issues as a result of the Pew Ocean Commission's report and other activities that were going on, certainly in DC and outside. So in some ways, to be, I guess, slightly trite, we thought someday there would be money and we wanted to get us some. So that's this was sort of our effort to garner resources. But since then, it's turned into such an amazing, I think, experiment in how you do collaboration between federal and state. So just a little background. NROC is equal partners of states and feds. So there are 6 states, 6 feds, and basically they share in the co-leads, they share in the management of this thing, and we all work together to set priorities. There are 3 committees, and I'm going to think today we're going to primarily talk about ocean planning. I chair, along with Chris Boelke, the Ocean Planning Committee. But we also are looking at, we have coastal hazards resilience, which is very active, as well as our ocean health. And these all have crossovers in between. So I guess the big question is sort of why would a state want to get into this thing? Because it has been an enormous amount of time and energy spent working on collaborating with each other. From the very beginning, my whole goal, I had 2 goals coming into this. One was data, and the second was really to have a seat at the table on federal activities in the blue ocean. And so the first to data. When I started in this whole coastal management gig, we had very, very few data sets offshore. I had thousands onshore, but I get basically 1 toe in the water and I had practically no data. So the Ocean Data Portal is now, and you're going to hear more about that from Nick and Emily, now has thousands of data sets. So that's a big deal, because if there were proposals that ever came to us that the state was interested in, we would have essentially no information by which to look at them, which put us at a huge disadvantage, which brings us to number 2, having a seat at the table. The real issue for us as states is that what happens beyond our coastal zone, beyond the 3 nautical miles, we don't really have any jurisdiction over except by jumping through some significant hoops. And so one of the things that we were really looking for was, how do we interact together to be able to have a say? And from a small state like New Hampshire, we have very much larger states on either side of us. So how do we have a say in what goes on off of their shores as well? So this really became, I think, part of the focus. And one of the things you're going to hear about today is about some of the best practices that we've learned for doing this kind of interaction. I guess I would just, kind of close this introductory piece with one thing, and that is that probably the greatest lesson that I take, let's take 2 great lessons that I come away with from now, 16 years of working on ocean planning and really thinking through these issues, is the value of public participation. So we created in this process an amazing amount of public interaction. I will tell you, we've gone from having very much people yelling at us during the meetings about this, to a point at which we no longer have kind of the talking heads at the front tables anymore. We have round tables, and the folks who are on NROC sit at those same tables with the stakeholders who have an interest in what goes on. At least we did that before COVID, and hopefully we'll do so afterwards. So this is, I think really this is a sign of how healthy we created such an amazing, I think, participatory actions here. And the second lesson was, I think, also the value of the diverse opinions that we heard. And I would especially point out to the tribes. We worked to really get the tribes at the table, and I think we learned a lot of things. One is, there's different ways of interacting that they bring to us. There's different information beyond what you can actually put in electrons that are brought to us. And I think reaching out to different populations that we never really had interacted with before. So I would just point out a few of those as important lessons, and those are the same reasons why, as a state, we continue to be a part of this, continue to put resources, and continue to think it's an extremely valuable activity. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris Boelke, and I look forward to question and answer. So if people have questions about why we're in this and what we're planning to get out of it, I really look forward to hearing more of your questions at the end. So Chris?
Great, thanks, Ted. Appreciate those comments. So, hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Chris Boelke. I'm the federal co-lead for the NROC Ocean Planning Committee. And I just want to note that when we look at this slide right here, the NROC in general, we have a lot of NOAA participation in the leadership of NROC. Betsy Nicholson is from NOAA, is the federal co-chair for NROC as a whole, and Adrienne Harrison of NOAA is the co-chair of the Coastal Hazards Committee. And then, as I said before, I am serving as the federal co-lead for the Ocean Planning Committee. So there's a lot of NOAA involvement in NROC. So as was mentioned earlier, my primary role is serving as the chief of the New England branch for NOAA Fisheries for the Habitat and Ecosystem Service Division up in the Greater Atlantic Regional Fisheries Office. So I thought I'd provide some thoughts as to why NROC and the Ocean Planning Committee and our work is so valuable to us at NOAA Fisheries. So the Habitat and Ecosystem Services Division is directly involved with all of the ocean activities that are identified on this slide, as well as some others, specifically offshore wind, aquaculture, offshore transmission, sand mining, LNG, commercial recreational fishing, and the habitat provisions there. We're involved in essential fish habitat consultations, siting of activities, construction and operation, monitoring, those types of activities. So, I mean, clearly there's a lot of activity that's going on, and there's no way that one program can or even should be doing all of this work. So here is really clear. This is where the value of NROC and the Ocean Planning Committee is for the Habitat Ecosystem Services Division and NOAA. So, I mean, NROC plays a critical role in advancing our collaboration with federal, state, tribal partners, provides a forum for a discussion of key topics and for building and maintaining relationships. As Nick and Emily will talk a little later, they'll talk today about the Northeast Ocean Data Portal. This is an invaluable source of data that's absolutely critical for us to be doing our job effectively in Habitat Ecosystem Services Division. And lastly, NROC is leading the development of best practices. And this is where we're exploring specific actions in order to use the data, these thousands of data sets, in order to improve and advance NOAA's as well as interagency decision-making processes for ocean activities. So hopefully this gives you a sense of why we in NOAA Habitat Ecosystem Services Division really sees our involvement in NROC as a priority. So so I'll turn it back to Nick and Emily to explore these topics in some greater detail.
Thanks, Chris. This is Nick Napoli. Thanks, Chris and Ted, and thank you to Peg and Katie and to NOAA for inviting us. This is Nick Napoli. I'm the Ocean Planning Director for NROC, and I'm going to get into some of the details along with Emily that Ted and Chris just introduced. Next slide, please, Emily. So specifically on the Ocean Planning Committee, and just quickly some history. Ted mentioned that NROC was formed in 2005 and established those three committees right away, essentially. So the Ocean Planning Committees really began sharing information and coordinating in the mid-2000s, and this is when initially the Cape Wind project and the Massachusetts and Rhode Islands were starting their ocean planning processes. It was around that time that it was obviously recognized that there should be some cross-state coordination on ocean planning issues. Similarly, to address some of the concerns and the issues that Ted mentioned, we established the Northeast Ocean Data Portal with many regional partners and NOAA in 2009. The Ocean Planning Committee then supported the development of the 2016 Northeast Ocean Plan, and that was under the Obama administration National Ocean Policy when there was a regional planning body. But that regional planning body essentially had many of the same, not all, but many of the same individuals and states and federal agencies at the table, and was really supported by the Ocean Planning Committee via staff and funding. Since 2016, the Ocean Planning Committee has been using the plan as a guide for developing essentially work plans that really advance the availability of data, coordination, and best practices. Next slide, please. So those really are the three focus areas for the Ocean Planning Committee, and Emily and I are going to get into some details for these, and you can see that how they overlap and inform each other. Next slide, please. So coordination and information sharing. This is one specific example. It's recent. We hosted it with the Mid-Atlantic Regional Council in the Ocean, which is the regional ocean partnership for the region from New York to Virginia, where both NROC and MARCO identified offshore wind transmission as an area where there just needed to be a better understanding of the issues given the advancement of offshore wind energy offshore. So we hosted a series of webinars, and it's indicative of the kinds of things we do in terms of sharing information for emerging issues across NROC. We hosted a series of webinars where experts from the transmission sector and the grid and the regional transmission organizations provided information to the NROC community, and that includes our broad sort of partner list within the region to increase the understanding of the transmission issues associated with offshore wind as it advances. We do have some potential next steps that we're talking about, and there's some good outcomes, and we haven't really dug into these yet, but there was certainly a lot of feedback from the many folks who participated across these issues in terms of really facilitating additional discussion or additional webinars to improve the understanding of specific issues like cable maintenance or hard substrate installation. Certainly informing our data development activities in terms of better understanding of seafloor habitat and potential impacts, and also some suggestions that we can do national outreach on issues that really are regional and across the region from NROC through MARCO. Next slide, please. Other recent topics where we've hosted regional discussions, and of course, like this and like many meetings over the last year, recently they've been virtual, but some of these actually go back to when we've met in person. We've hosted a webinar and are looking at another webinar on aquaculture as aquaculture activities change in the region. We've hosted specific meetings and webinars on offshore wind, both to understand the issues as things are developing and also just to understand the status. We've hosted a webinar on the many state ocean planning activities that are going on. Massachusetts is on its third, I believe it's its third update to the Massachusetts Ocean Plan. There's the Rhode Island SAMP. Connecticut has developed the Long Island Sound Blue Plan. And recently, Maine has started to look at areas offshore for research installation for offshore wind. So there's many state ocean planning activities that we try to help inform folks about. Similarly, Stillwagon Bank went through an update to its, or is going through an update to its sanctuary management plan. The Fishery Management Council often participates, particularly their habitat committee, in terms of that's where they're really discussing some of the ocean planning issues and the types of potential impacts to fisheries. And of course, we provide opportunities for updates on federal ocean policy. So there's just a series of examples of how we're trying to coordinate and share information on emerging topics. Next slide, please, Emily. Okay, next topic, best practices. And Chris introduced this, and really Chris has been leading this, and so questions may be most relevant for him on some of these best practices. But we have been convening a work group that has been identifying best practices for ocean permitting and management processes and trying to think of ways to implement these. And really a lot of these are focused on early in the process where information sharing and data and guidance on outreach can be useful. So there are really 4 broad categories, and I'm going to go through them. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details. I might just highlight 1 or 2 here or there as they relate to some of the slides that are coming up in the discussion that we're going to have. The first category is on outreach and engagement, best practices for early outreach and engagement. You see 3 of them here. For each of these, we're developing some documents that describe some of the case studies and some of the ways these have been implemented in the past and maybe can be implemented going forward. One specific example to highlight, we'll be talking about this in a second, is as proposed agency actions are noticed in the Federal Register or elsewhere, can we have interactive maps that depict the boundaries of that proposed agency action so that we can look at the resources and the activities already occurring in those areas? And that's something we'll talk a little bit more about. Next slide, please. Okay, next category, and again, Chris talked a bit about this as well. Agency and interjurisdictional coordination. And this first one is really what the last topic I talked about in terms of identifying emerging issues and providing opportunities via NROC for coordination and information sharing. That's really a lot of what NROC does, and as you heard from Ted and Chris, it's part of why they participate. So those issues in terms of transmission or aquaculture or understanding state planning activities, those bubble up from the NROC community, and that's where we identify perhaps an opportunity to provide a webinar or a meeting for discussion. I would like to also point out here that there's the rest of these are about coordination between jurisdictions and consultation. And I was recently reminded that about 5 years ago, the tribal governments in the region developed a series of best practices that we can reference for folks. Next slide, please. Use of data and information, and Chris again referenced this, and we can go into some of these details as we're talking about the Northeast Ocean Data Portal. One I'd like to highlight is the second one here. This has led to some recent projects that Emily's going to talk about, but it's been identified by the agencies that there's this huge amount of data collection going on offshore associated with new interest in offshore development. And the best practice suggestion here is to really begin to integrate those data into products as quickly as possible so that they can inform future planning and siting. Next slide, please. I'll just say the last category here is really focusing on rolling a lot of this stuff into the pre-application phase so that a lot of this information sharing, understanding of the issues, outreach is done early. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to talk now about the Northeast Ocean Data Portal and then turn it over to Emily. First, if you haven't gone there, northeastoceandata.org is the site. It is maintained by NROC with many partners. It is a source of, at this point, over 5,000 map products. We're talking geospatial products that are really derived from a lot of sources, and they're intending to show the footprint and changes over time for activities that are occurring offshore or the distribution of resources. Importantly, what we strive to do, and we'll talk about this by topic, is really we're covering a lot of topics, and you can see it on the left. That's an image from our homepage. You can see all the topics that many of the topics that we're covering in the portal. And what we really try to do is, if it's for whichever topic we're trying to develop a product for, we try and engage the community that really knows that activity or the resource best in both identifying the products that are needed and in reviewing the draft products before they're posted. Next slide, please. This is just another characterization of the different themes that we cover on the portal, the different ocean activities and economics themes, and the different ocean resources and conditions themes. Next slide, please. So who uses it? Our use has consistently gone up over the last 5 years. There's perhaps a big bump in the around 2016, 2017, and that's been fairly consistently going up since then. And we have many, many case studies. I'm not going to go through all of these, but they vary. We have a lot of general public use, both even in ways we didn't intend. We hear of lots of educational uses of the portal, but also we see it being used increasingly in public comments on proposed agency actions. Many of the federal agencies use the portal as a one, but not the only first place to go to get information and to point various constituents to get information offshore. Also, we see, and when there are public meetings, we see increased use of the site via hits. Next slide, please. So, as I said, we like to, and this is something we're working on with our best practices, is how and when to use all of the information resources out there. And this is something we'd like to continue to do, which is provide guidance on where our information resource sort of fits, given that there's just a lot of information and data resources out there. And we like to note often that this is just one resource. It's one that's got a lot of investment from financially and people's time and from the expert community, but there are also others. And where does it fit? And certainly folks within NOAA who may be on this webinar are familiar with the Ocean Reports tool and the Marine Cadastre. And those are national efforts which provide some data that we use, and it makes our lives easier that some of those data sets we don't have to do ourselves. But we also identify the issues in the region that require additional data and products and engage the experts in the region to develop those products, as I said before. And that's where the regional portal sort of fits. We also encourage folks to dig down further. Individual agencies like the NOAA fisheries, like other parts of NOAA, like USGS, states, they may have more detailed data that we encourage folks who are using our resource to go further investigate. And of course, there's a lot of contextual data sets for why ocean use or resources in a certain area, and certainly that we encourage folks to go to our implementation of the IUS NROC to understand some of the conditions that may have created those patterns that you're seeing on our portal. Next slide. So importantly, and this goes back to the best practice, one of the best practices we have addressed, or we continue to try to address, one of the suggestions in our best practices by providing access to maps and information about proposed agency actions. And we've recently added a menu item for that called Current Issues, and you could go directly there, find out the current status of offshore wind projects. We recently had a proposed offshore disposal site. We put the coordinates for that disposal site up during the public comment period. We're working with the Fishery Management Council on some of their actions that have a specific spatial component to them, and we're just this week and next adding drop downs related to Coast Guard's port access route studies and proposed anchorages, and the Corps of Engineers public notices. Next slide, please. I'm actually going to turn this over to Emily from here to talk about some of these specific data themes and the progress with them.
Cool, thanks, Nick. Hi everyone, my name's Emily Shumchenia. I'm just going to walk through some of these data examples and themes and types of information on the Northeast Ocean Data Portal, recognizing all of the context and information you just heard relates directly to a lot of these, so I'll try to make linkages where I can. This slide about energy and infrastructure data and information relates really closely to what Nick was just talking about with current issues. So if you went to the current issues menu item and scrolled down or moused over offshore wind projects, you find this resource, which is a collection of all of the different projects that are sort of proposed in the region, a collection of the different lease areas, and quick links to maps and further information about each of those things. So we've worked very closely with BOEM to pull all of this information together, recognizing like there's really no other place where you can find quick status updates on all of this stuff with maps right close at hand and look at the data as you're sort of investigating, okay, which project is in the construction operations phase, or which project is really still looking at, you know, planning and analysis and in the leasing stage. So we're maintaining this almost on a weekly basis at this point, and working closely with BOEM in the States and others on making sure that the information is relevant and up to date, and that folks have quick access to the data and information they need on these things. For commercial fishing, this is obviously a theme, a data theme and an information theme that we work really closely with NOAA on. We currently have commercial fishing activity depicted using various types of underlying data. We're just wrapping up and kind of still integrating the results from a large project that we conducted over the year last year and into this year with NOAA Regional Ocean Data Sharing Funds that we worked with the Regional or the Responsible Offshore Development Alliance, that's RODA. They helped us with outreach to fishing communities and different fisheries representatives to try to understand how we can better depict activity data on the portal. And so we're in the process of integrating their feedback into these maps and information and bringing them up to date. So if you go to the portal today, you'll see that the data for vessel monitoring systems data sets, or the activity that you see represented in the map here, they're just current as of 2016. So we're going to be bringing those up to date to incorporate the latest information through 2019. We're also, you know, making little tweaks like updating the layers so that the year range actually matches the fishing season of the fishery that's depicted on the map. That was a strong recommendation heard across fisheries from the actual industry. And also working closely with folks at NOAA Fisheries to incorporate the fishing footprints data that they've spent a lot of time building and supporting, and, you know, showing great interactive animations and tools on NOAA Fisheries websites. So getting crossover there and making the linkages a lot more clear is one of our goals in the very near term for this theme. For marine transportation data, these data sets are numerous. They relate to, you know, different navigational features, ports, but one of the cooler data sets that I'm showing in an animation here is the vessel traffic data. You all may be familiar with this. We show animations of vessel traffic for ranges of years on a monthly basis. And it's broken up by different vessel categories. So you can kind of get a sense for the different types of use by different sectors and how they use ocean space differently. And this is one of my favorite data sets to just go explore, because you see all sorts of weird and interesting patterns and try to figure out what's going on. If you're interested in some crossover in themes here, you can kind of go searching in the AIS data for evidence of geophysical surveys, either for research or for the offshore wind development, as the developers going out there to survey their own lease sites. You can see evidence of that in the AIS, and it's pretty cool. So this one is another set of, it's another data theme where we do really tight collaboration with Coast Guard, with NOAA, of course, and BOEM, and a lot of local folks too, port operator groups in the region and safety and security forums. So recreation, and apologies for sort of just running through these one by one. If there's if there's questions about any particular one, we're happy to revisit and talk in more detail when we get to the end here. But recreation data is a data set that involves, or a set of data sets that really involve a lot of coordination with folks in the region. It's building on important work that's been done already, or that had been done through the state ocean planning processes up in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and even some of the work that Stellwagenbank National Marine Sanctuary does with their stakeholders. So the examples I'm showing here are data sets that are going to be updated in the next month or so, actually, with work that we did with these industry work groups over the last year, completely virtually because of COVID, but really successful nonetheless. So these are really unique data sets in our region specifically. I don't know of any other kind of data where it shows, or any other kind of resource that shows you, whale watching activity in these different categories of dominant, supplemental, at this level of detail. And so this information comes directly from the industry. They do participatory GIS with us and tell us the best ways to depict their industry so that they, like Ted was saying, have a seat at the table and can come, to different processes and say, hey, these areas are important to us. And the same is true for the scuba data. And we've got some really interesting additional information coming out in terms of what are the marine life and habitat information that folks are observing when they're out scuba diving. And those data will be released in the next couple months too. So we're really excited about those. Marine life is a huge topic. A lot of NOAA involvement, obviously. On this slide, I'm just focused on the work that we're doing this year, but this is a topic that's been an NROC strength for about 7 years in pulling together all of the different efforts in the region at all the different entities, whether it's research entities, aquariums, the federal agencies in the states, pulling together vast amounts of data sets to try to come up with regional pictures of important marine species, wildlife in general, and other ecosystem components. So this slide concentrates on the work we're doing this year, which is another NOAA Regional Ocean Data Sharing Funds project, working with the Marine Life Data and Analysis team, as we have since 2014. That team is led by Duke University, the Marine Geospatial Ecology Lab, and it's highly coordinated with lots of other stuff going on right now that's marine life focused, like the NYSERDA State of the Science work groups, BOEM's Environmental Studies program, and other efforts. So we're working on updating existing products that we developed sort of for the first time and brought together for the first time under this ocean planning umbrella back in around 2015, 2016. We're seeing now that these are highly used data products depicting, marine mammals, birds, and fish, and we're continuing to keep them updated with the latest information and looking to create new products that sort of address the issues of the day, such as climate change, submarine cables. This was a topic that came up, in the offshore transmission webinar series that Nick mentioned earlier. So there's lots of crossover, lots of crosstalk between different parts of NROC and the initiatives that we're working on, and the linkages to the data to support them. So when we see this need identified by a particular conversation, it's really great to be able to point to data on the portal and say, hey, we can provide some answers or some insights on that. Just to dig a little bit deeper into the nuts and bolts of the marine life data, because I thought that maybe this would be of interest for this audience. You see the NOAA logo repeated here a lot. This is, this figure demonstrates the complex workflow that we have sort of honed over the years with all of you and all of these partners on the slide here to figure out how you go from collecting data, like observing marine mammals or doing fish trawls, who maintains that data and how does it stay updated, and who hands it off to people doing the synthesis and modeling and mapping, and then how does it actually get on the portal, and then all the stuff we talked about up to now, how does it get used and who's using it, and so on and so forth. So I think this is an important slide to recognize the number of entities involved, and that it is a process that can be repeated continually, and we are still honing it and figuring out how to make it more efficient. Seafloor habitat is another area that we've been working on for quite a while, but has made some important progress recently. We've sort of established this NROC Seafloor Habitat Data Work Group, which includes members from the offshore wind developer community and experts throughout the region on seafloor habitat data in general from state and federal agencies and academia. We assembled this work group based on a need expressed by NROC members back in 2018, I think, in an offshore wind specific meeting about how the portal could help support the dissemination of all of the various data sets being collected by offshore wind developers to sort of cite and assess their projects. So this work group was also assembled we got an opportunity to do it in response to that NROC need through this project that was funded by Mass CEC, BOEM, and Rhode Island DEM to Inspire Environmental, our partner on this project. So this opportunity came up, we formed the work group, and we're looking to create these project outputs to basically come up with a standard set of habitat variables that relate to the different stages of offshore wind development and kind of contribute to these different stages of agency review, pre-application, environmental impact review, and then eventually monitoring. We also recognize this presents a huge opportunity to improve our understanding of habitat across the region, and we want to leverage that. And then, of course, to use the portal to disseminate it and come up with, you know, maybe a set of intermediate scale habitat data products for each project that contribute to this regional picture. So nothing too detailed that would, you know, step on the toes of the developers and you know, ask them to provide proprietary information, but something that does contribute to our regional understanding of habitat. And we're finding that everyone is really excited about this project. So we've gotten great support from the developers. They're all, you know, very enthusiastic to talk with us. We've been having one-on-one discussions with work group members over this, I guess, late winter, early spring, following our kickoff meeting in late January. And we're working right now on kind of putting on paper, okay, what are the benefits of this project to all the parties involved? And what are some of those data products that we can start working on? And can we experiment with some data and kind of do this as a proof of concept? This is a pilot project, but we hope to build on this and maybe even apply some of these lessons learned to other types of data coming from offshore wind developers. So this is a really exciting project. And this is the last area I'll touch on, you know, completely different, again, totally different topic here, coastal vegetation and blue carbon. This is another really exciting field that's sort of gotten a resurgence or re-energization from the Biden administration. And it turns out we had already heard from EPA Region 1 late last year that they were interested in working on this with us. So they were able to provide some funding and some support to coordinate with experts in the region that are measuring and mapping carbon stocks and to apply those to the habitat data that the portal has had available, you know, for the last 5 years or so. We've had these inventories of seagrass, inventories of eelgrass data, and salt marsh data that we could leverage to figure out, okay, how can we create this regional picture of blue carbon stocks? So the goals of this project are to update that coastal vegetation data. So the eelgrass data and the salt marsh data will be fully updated as a part of this project. Should be released on the portal actually this week or next week. And then to come up with this generalized heat map of blue carbon in our coastal vegetation habitats. This is a proof of concept map that you're looking at now. We've only just started talking about it with the work group, but this is the idea where we want to be able to point to areas where, you know, we have huge reservoirs of blue carbon and be able to highlight those for folks. Numerous applications of this, from restoration to, you know, managing and assessing impacts of various coastal developments and things like that. So this is another ongoing project that we're really excited to keep advancing. With that, you know, sort of speed dating data, you know, presentation I just threw at you, we'll wrap it up there and sort of hold the last 15 minutes or so if you have questions. But if you have, you know, any other thoughts, feedback, or more complicated questions and you want to reach out, please do. the data portal has a Twitter feed where we announce when we release updates to our data. So if you're into that social media thing, you can follow us there, or otherwise just stop by and check our news page from time to time, and you'll be able to keep up with what we're doing. So thanks again for having us today, and we look forward to a little bit of discussion.
Thanks so much, Emily. Thanks to Ted and Chris and Nick and yourself. Great job, a tremendous amount of effort on the part of your team and all the partners that you've worked with. So I just want to congratulate you all. It's really enormous. So thank you very much. Turn it over to Katie. Do we have any questions coming in? I think we may have a few.
We have one at least, and I'm sure others are busily typing. My first question is, are the Northeast Ocean Data Portal and the Ocean Reports databases linked?
I'll take this. This is Nick Napoli. The Ocean Reports database, a lot of the data that are in Ocean Reports, we have in the Northeast Ocean Data Portal. So the data sets there that are national coverages that the NOAA and BOEM teams spend a lot of time creating really benefit us, because those are topics that we don't really have to spend a lot of time digging in on, and you know, I won't cover all of them, but there's a lot of administrative layers in terms of agency jurisdictions, regional jurisdictions, those types of layers. There's a lot of layers related to marine transportation in terms of where anchorages are, fairways, and things like that. And some of the AIS data we get from the Marine Cadastre effort, and there are others. And so we benefit closely we benefit a lot from coordinating closely with them and from the data that they develop. And then we go on and focus on regional issues and really bringing together data products in the region to address some of the issues we're hearing from folks.
Thanks, Nick. I don't have another question, but I'm going to follow up that with a personal question of my own. How do people get feedback to you? Is there something on the website or on the portals that you just like a feedback form, or would it be more personal like your emails here?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. There's definitely, if you go to the Northeast Ocean Data site, there's a contact that goes to actually me and Emily and a couple of other folks. We hear a lot of feedback through that. We hold a lot of NROC holds a lot of meetings. We get feedback in that way. And then if we're talking about a particular topic, and some of this has, you know, evolved due to COVID, but if we're talking, like Emily said, if we're talking about marine transportation, I attend a lot of the Port Operator Group and Safety and Security Forum meetings in the region, and that's where I interact with a lot of the folks from the maritime community, as an example. And you know, you can imagine with Emily's slides about the different marine life products, we convene work groups around each of those taxa in the marine life products, and invite experts, and are always looking for folks to engage. And so the best way is via email, if you want to get involved in something, but certainly we get a lot of feedback through our outreach.
Great. Okay, we have one more question coming in. When viewing data in Data Explorer, can you specify a time range?
I can take that one. That's a great question. So the time windows for data right now are data set specific. So if I understand the question correctly, you know, I'm imagining like you would go to the Data Explorer and say, I want to see all the data for 2015. You can't do that right now, unfortunately, because not all data have an annual component or even a time specific component, a temporal component like a year attached to it. Like, for example, our marine life data are predictive models that represent, you know, climatological mean conditions on any given year. So they're not really attached to a particular year. But for the data sets that do have a discrete time component, like the marine transportation data I mentioned, some of the fishing data, you can discretely select, I want to view 2015, or I want to view 2015 and 16, or something like that. You have to kind of go data set by data set and pick your time window of interest.
Thanks. And I myself am poking around this your ocean data site right now. Is there training on how to use these portals that people can attend or watch on their own?
Yep, I'll take this one too. We actually have a handful of tutorial videos, like 2 minutes or under, that show you how to do really common tasks or use some of the more complex data sets. They can be found under the About menu, under tutorials. And we do workshops kind of on demand. So if your lab or group or your office is interested in learning more about the data portal, or even if just you alone are interested, you can send me and Nick an email, and we're happy to do a screen share with you at any time, any length of time too. We've done them virtually for, 3 hours. We go through the whole thing, and people bring up, oh, I have this specific use in mind. I'd like to use the data portal for this. Can you help me do it? And we're absolutely willing to do that. It's something we do all the time. So if you have that sort of request, don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. So linking back to our very first question, since the databases are not linked, the Ocean Reports database and the Ocean Data Portal, as the Ocean Data Portal is updated, why would that information not also go into the National Database Portal?
I could take this one too. So they actually are linked in that way. For relevant data sets, they're shared between the two. Any updates on one will be shown on the other. There are some data sets which are subsetted, and so there's particular decisions made about whether or not to create a subset and create a duplicate on the Northeast Ocean Data Portal or Ocean Reports, or vice versa. But for the most part, if there's a data set that we leverage from the Ocean Reports tool or the Marine Cadastre or any other national data set, really, a lot of times we pull in these services, their web services, from the source themselves. BOEM's lease areas data set and their active renewable energy leases is a great example of this. When they update that data set, the updates flow down to us automatically. This is a fantastic, magical web-based thing that we really try to take advantage of whenever we can. And it makes it so that there aren't duplicate copies of data all over the internet, and a user has to try to figure out which is the most recent and where it comes from and whose version is the right one, and so on and so forth. So we work together with our partners to make sure we're taking advantage of the opportunities to do that just as described.
Thank you so much, Emily, for explaining that.
Katie, I have one question, actually a two-part question. One is to the rest of the group of the speakers. We obviously had regional ocean planning entities around the country, and I was wondering if there's still a lot of information sharing, cross-connection going on with the other groups. And this, by the way, is just another announcement. We do plan on having presentations from some of the other regional ocean planning groups around the country over the next couple of months. So stay tuned for that. But I was just curious what kind of dialogue is going on with those other bodies.
This is Nick.
So,
I was
Chris, I can
deferring
start
to
off
Ted
with
and Chris.
So we
Go
do.
ahead. Go ahead, Chris.
All right, Nick, I'll just start and you can chime in. So we do work closely with MARCO, with the Mid-Atlantic Regional Council on the Ocean. One of the things that was highlighted in these slides was our transmission webinars, 3 transmission webinars that happened over the last within the last couple of months. Those were in conjunction with MARCO. So there's a lot of things that we are working with them. We do data work plans together with them, and I'll let Nick go into those in a little more detail.
Yeah, I'll just say there's a lot of coordination, more than we could probably get in the details of, as Chris said, with on issues that are cross regional like transmission. We try and address some of those informational sessions together. The portals, the Mid-Atlantic has a portal that I'm sure they will talk about if they're doing a presentation that is closely linked with the Northeast, and the work plans are very similar. And you'll even see some of these slides. The Marine Life Data Project, for example, is a coordinated project with MARCO. The Commercial Fisheries Data Project is coordinated with MARCO. I'll also just say that we also coordinate with other regions generally, and I see that John Hansen from the West Coast is on. We're often talking with our counterparts and other regional ocean partnerships in the West Coast and in the Gulf of Mexico on just what we're all doing and learning from each other.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Chris. That's great. What do you folks think of as some of your future challenges? I mean, obviously, this is a tremendous amount of work, but what comes to mind for you in terms of future challenges?
I think that one of the issues is certainly going to be one of resources. I hope that people got an appreciation for the fantastic amount of work that's getting done by a very small group of people. And I think there's going to be a need for additional resources in the future. I think that we're seeing more and more demand for the kinds of things that we can do. Nick and Emily talked about the vetting of data sets. This is the sort of secret sauce that goes into the data portal, is that those data sets have actually been looked at by people who actually know something about those particular things, whether they're fishermen or maritime planners or transportation. They have that, and so I think maintaining that level of capacity is going to be a challenge. And then frankly, there are more and more uses of our ocean. The kinds of things that we are trying to do with participatory government and best management practices for interactions and keeping up with better and better data, this is all going to become magnified as the focus on aquaculture increases, on other offshore resources, and who knows what the next big thing around the corner is. So I guess that's a couple of things I would put out there.
Thanks, Ted.
Okay, I will say thank you all. I do not see any more questions, but if someone does have them, please type that into the question panel. And if we don't get to it before the end of the hour, which is in the next 2 minutes, we can pass that on to our speakers after the seminar. I will remind everyone that this was recorded, so if you were in that other conflicting meeting currently happening, you can find it on our YouTube channel. And I was right, there was someone furiously typing. We have one more question. Are you encouraged by the administration's priority on offshore wind will lead to more resources for MARCO and MSP?
Should I take this? This is Ted.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. This is one of those questions where the non-fed, this is why we have feds and non-feds on the in NROC, is so that we can, there's some questions some people can't talk to. I will be happy to speak to that. I am encouraged. I think it also raises the stakes in terms of making sure that we do a great job of bringing people into the process, that people don't feel like they're being rolled over by these priorities. It's important that we have the states and our stakeholders input all along the way. Yes, offshore energy is important, but let's not kid ourselves that it doesn't have other impacts on the ecosystem. So we do need to be looking at those very carefully. But I am really excited about where we're headed. I just hope that we can keep up. That's, I think, the real challenge for us all, is making sure that we can keep up with this energy towards energy. And so I guess we put ourselves out there as NROC to the last 3 administrations saying, we're here for you. If you want help in coordination, you want help in generating participatory government, you want help in putting data in good places, we're there to help. If you have resources, we're game to help move the ball forward.
Great, thank you so much for answering that, Ted. We are at time, so I would like to thank everyone for attending today, especially for our speakers for leading such an awesome discussion. This was recorded, it'll be on YouTube. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful and safe rest of your Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.